military officer. Despite her age, she's a retired military officer. She was a BA Honours in professional writing at York. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of British Columbia and is a PhD candidate in literary studies and creating memoir at the University of Gloucestershire in the United Kingdom. Kelly won the Anansi Press Golden Anniversary Award and was the 2014 and 2017 Barbara Novak Award for the personal essay. Her essays have appeared in many, many anthologies, such as Chatelaine, amongst others. Maclean's Globe and Mail. Her memoir, Girls Do Not Apply, Field Notes from the Forces, was an instant Globe and Mail bestseller and named one of the top 100 books in the 2019 Globe and Mail. She teaches non-creative fiction at the University of King's College in Halifax. Her next memoir will be released in 2022, and it is our hope that she will come back to York as part of a book launch. Without further ado, I really would like Kelly to speak and for her to convey to you her thoughts about what student life can, should be, and maybe is. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. It's I often feel when people hear of a military background, they're like, doesn't quite compute with what you're seeing on the screen and my hot pink dress. And it's true. It didn't then, and it sometimes still doesn't now. But I actually graduated. I was in high school right when 9/11 happened, and the military is in my family, 4 generations on both sides. So I joined then, very naive to what I would experience. So my book was about sexual harassment in the forces, and it was a hard subject to write about. But also, when I started at York, the military actually really wanted me to change my degree. They wanted me to switch my degree to business because it would be more in line with what I was doing in the military, which was human resources. I had wanted this program my whole life. All I wanted to do was study writing. And I used to joke, I think my parents feared I would sit on the side of the street with a little sign like, I'll write you short stories for food. And so I think they feared that would be my future. And then they were very relieved when I took a military job. But I also let that crush my spirit. I didn't write a thing the entire 10 years I was in the military, which was such a shame. But all this to say, when I talk about what my background is, it's mostly because I always had this sense that I didn't belong, that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't what people expected of me. And so I'm here to tell you to screw them in a delicate fashion. You get to be who you are, and you get to define who you get to be. So that's kind of the theme of my chat today. So it's hard to move in our world today. We're feeling very divided with elections, with COVID, with everything happening virtually, and we miss each other. And more than ever, things are feeling really contentious, I think. So it can be really hard to find community, to make community with people who sometimes have very differing opinions than us, and to also suddenly find ourselves in these environments that's so much bigger than what we knew before from high school. My high school was even pretty big. I think we had 2,200 people, but you knew everyone in your grade, and maybe you're a bit of a shining star. Maybe you felt like you were a bit of a nerd. Maybe you always felt ostracized, but I can tell you York is the place where you will find some home. And I didn't for a long time. I got there, I commuted, so I often felt like I was really quite distant from people because I was always keen to get home because I had to work full time at the same time to pay for school. But I was willing to do whatever it took because I wanted to be there so badly. And this is the magic of when you start your degree, you're finally doing what you want to do and what interests you. Maybe you're doing a little bit of what your parents want you to do, but you get to play with some electives on a lighter note if that's the case. So when I thought about why I loved York and why I chose York, I applied for a bunch of different kinds of programs. I applied for creative writing programs. I applied for, I don't know what I was thinking when I was applying for political science. I failed political science at York, folks. It wasn't meant for me. But I applied for a little bit of everything, and I actually got in. When I got into York, I decided to go there because it had this great blend of practicality with the arts part that I really craved. So I think sometimes we have this thought when people would hear I was part of Founders and they'd say, oh yeah, the arts people, with a bit of a snide little side eye. No, the arts people, we make the world fresh and bright and sparkly. And it doesn't mean that you're impractical. It doesn't mean you're not going to pay your bills. It means you're going to feed that part of your heart that brings you to work every day. So I loved it for the community that I felt there in the halls of Founders. I went to my only university party at Founders, but before the night even got started, I fell and broke a rib and kind of wrecked my whole night there. That aside, no, there was no alcohol involved. It was just the Kelly involved. But that aside, that's my really fond Founders memory. But I felt community there because I was with other people who loved what I loved. So when we're looking at a world that's so divided right now, you're going to find other people who love what you do. And there's something really special about that. Everyone who's felt like they don't belong somewhere suddenly has somewhere to belong. You're going to find your people. So I curated my life advice list. My husband said, oh, are you going to look at a bunch of other Keynote addresses to universities and get some inspiration? And I thought, no, I'm just going to be exactly who I am, because that's what I hope for all of you. My first piece of advice, because it was the thing I didn't do, is to get involved. And I don't mean you have to join 900 extracurriculars to pad your resume. I mean, spend time with your friends having a coffee after you go to class. I mean, go to the library. I mean, go to the book launches, go to the different events that happen in the different atriums and listen to what's happening in the world around you. We're finally starting to explore more with bigger environments and bigger ideas and bigger people, and that's exciting. So get involved. It can be really daunting, like I said, when you're going from a smaller pot of people to a bigger group of people, to feel overwhelmed and daunted. Everyone does. Everyone feels that way. We all feel like we don't quite belong. When I put my book out, and it talked a lot about that, about feeling very artsy, and my bosses would say, what do you mean you have a degree in professional writing books? And they'd always do books like it was some dirty sentence. It didn't compute for them. And for a while, I let that make me feel shameful. And now I was like, yeah, I have this thing that you don't have. And that makes me special. And you get to have your thing too. So get involved so that you feel like you belong. Otherwise, you'll always feel like you're on the periphery of something. My second is to ask questions and to get curious. I was raised very much to be a rule follower, says the lady who joined the military. I'm terrified of authority. I'm terrified of getting in trouble all the time. But if I had instead pushed back on some things that perhaps in life, not at school, but in life made me uncomfortable, if I had felt more prepared to be myself, I think of all the things that might have been possible. And that would only happen if I asked those questions that I had. Sometimes, I mean simple things like sometimes a student, when I teach now, will say to me, why should I read this? What's the point of reading this? What's the point of this reading? What does it have to do? Because they're not going to be tested on it. It might not seem relevant. And I say, I'm giving it to you. I mean, it's to learn, it's to grow. Think of how that's what you're here for. That's your job, is to learn and grow. Get curious about your program and the people around you. Number 3, does someone? No? I thought someone was talking. Okay. Number 3, don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough. And I don't mean in terms of grades, because this is the tricky thing about academia and studying and learning, is it's easy for me to say that, but you're still getting a grade at the end of the day. We're all striving to move forward. But I think when I got to York and I failed a class, and it was the first time I had failed anything, I was heartbroken and devastated. I got a D as well. And I was devastated. I got kicked out of the professional writing program because I didn't maintain the B+ average required of me. And I was so close to quitting, it wasn't even funny. And the reason I was failing wasn't because I wasn't smart enough. It was because I wasn't engaging. It was because I was just sort of, I wasn't reading. I was kind of like skirting the lines. I felt like I could cruise on what had been education that had sort of carried me that far. But I instantly, when I saw those grades, felt like I wasn't good enough, that I was a failure, that I was never gonna move on, and getting kicked out of the program, getting this letter, I was devastated. I ate a lot of hot dogs at the food carts around there to assuage my sadness. And then I was like, you know what? No, I wrote a letter to the university requesting that they reverse their decision. Here's why. I owned my mistake, and then I learned from it. And I thought, this is what happens when I don't engage. This is what happens when I don't go to class. This is what happens when I don't get myself interested and engaged in what's happening around me. This is what happens when you don't ask the questions that you have, where if I felt like I was drowning, what would have happened if I had actually said to my professor, I feel like I'm drowning? They probably would have supported me and helped me, or my TA. So don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough. Only you get to make that choice about yourself. Number 4 is to think beyond today, but not too far. When I was doing my undergrad, I never thought I would further my education for some reason, in that I only thought I was so desperate to get to that goal. I was the first person in my family to go to university. I was so keen to get there that I didn't think beyond it. I didn't think about maintaining a certain grade average so that maybe I could do a master's degree. Blessedly, I did, but I didn't think that at the time. I didn't think about making connections with my professors because I didn't feel like they cared, even though they did. I met endless ones who did, but because I wasn't engaged and I wasn't involved as I wish I had been. So I encourage people to think beyond today. What do you want beyond this? And you also don't have to know right now. It's okay to not know. It's okay to explore and figure it out. And that's part of the engagement piece. That's part of finding community that's going to highlight that for you. I can barely read the chat because it's going quickly, but Raven said, B's and C's are better than no mark. Yeah, Raven, I'm with you. And it also means you're going and you're learning. You know, sometimes failure doesn't have to be this dead set, but now I'm going back in time. But as far as thinking beyond today, it also means to have fun today. It's okay to have a little bit of fun. It's okay to party safely. It's okay to have that typical university experience in a safe environment with people that you love and trust. And so I found York was the place to do that. In my 3rd and 4th year, when I finally really started to commit to education, because I realized I forgot I loved this. I forgot I love putting words on a page. And so when I finally started getting involved, I was so happy and my marks soared because I was finally with other people that I loved and enjoyed. When I didn't understand something, I started asking my professors and my TAs, and they answered me. And then I figured it out. What a magical experience. Why was I so frightened to ask those questions? So I encourage you to think beyond. Think beyond that today. Think about what it will mean when you learn that piece of information and how it will serve you in the future. Number 5 is to be tenacious. You get to define you. No one gets to tell me I'm not a writer. I make that decision. And the only reason I'm a writer today is because I refuse to let anyone say no to me. That sounded a little pushy, but in that, if it doesn't work out, I will try and try and try and try and never let it get me down. And so I really encourage people to be tenacious. Doesn't have to mean pushy. It doesn't have to mean aggressive. It just means you have to keep going. You have to keep trying. And sometimes that also means reaching out when it doesn't feel like you can do it on your own. Number 6 is above all, to me, with careers in the arts, is to find a balance between the passion and the profession. And by that, I mean, think outside the box. People who told me that being a writer was impractical, that I wouldn't be able to financially survive. This is my business. This is how I treat it, like a business. I think outside the box in terms of, what can I offer beyond just books that I'm writing? Can I write essays? Can I give lectures? Can I teach? There are so many things beyond the small scope of what we think we're studying and how those things expand, that sometimes it just involves that thinking outside the box. And I thought too about, if I had had that attitude when I was in school, would I have felt like such a failure once I joined the military for being so much like me and so much not like what the military wanted of me? And so when you think outside the box, you also think outside the box that you've created for yourself, or that your family created for you, or that your childhood created for you. We all come with our own stories, our own backgrounds, and that can be, it can feel like it's a disadvantage at many times, but also only you are you. And there's a magic to that. And so when you bring that to the table, only you are going to be able to speak to that piece of knowledge with your frame of reference attached to it. And I think that's something that's really magical about studying in school. And I also think it's something great to take onto your profession. So you're more than your degree, but this is where your future is starting. And it's exciting, and it's also scary as all get out, but it gets better, I swear. And no one gets to tell you that the arts are silly and ridiculous and a waste of time, because all these people in the room, our virtual room, are proof of otherwise. If we didn't believe in the arts, the pandemic really showed us how necessary the arts are to us. Think of all the things that suddenly were opened up online: museums, galleries, virtual tours of historic sites, lectures like this where we can connect all over the world. There is something crazy amazing that comes from that. And so this is the start, and your success in the arts in your career will not necessarily be measured by money. That's not everything. Living is everything, but not stuff. And my final, I have two tiny little pieces. Number one, if you are struggling emotionally, academically, talk to people. York has great resources. I struggle with depression and anxiety every single day. And so I'm in therapy. I talk to people. I say when I'm really having a hard day. And that's what helps me get to the next day and the next day, because it's also that part of creating community. You'd be surprised how many people feel the same. And my final parting thing as a writer, I would be remiss to not tell you to read diversely. And by that, I mean, read books by people of color, read books by LGBTQ authors, read books about experiences that are beyond your own. Because this is the beauty of school, and this is the beauty of a school in a place like Toronto that's so magically rich and diverse, is the growth that comes from understanding an experience that's beyond your own is the spice of life, truly. It is how you will grow as a person. It's how you will grow in your thought process of how to approach the world and move within it, and support other people in that same process. And I think it also gives us a lot of empathy. And these days, if there's one thing I always thought about people in the arts, it's that, and scientifically proven, that we are empathetic folks. And someone else also said about neurodivergent people. Yes, we just, any experience that's beyond your own, read about it, learn about it. And this is where you will find and thrive. And I have no doubt that all of you will have a great time at York, a great time at Founders. Don't break any ribs, and don't pick a party night on the only night where a fire alarm will go off 4 times between 2 and 3 p.m. And that's all. Good luck, everyone.
Kelly, what can I say? But just, first of all, an enormous thank you. My mother would often say of me that that boy will never use 10 words when he can use 100. You've used far less words than I would in trying to summarize, characterize, depict all of the different things that we all want to say about what it means to be a student and the significance of the intrinsicality of education and arts and the social science education. I've not heard anyone say it better than you. And so an enormous thanks for your characterization